Welcome to the virtual lecture organized by National Services Club and IQAC of NSS College Pandalam in connection with the celebration of India's 71st anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution. We are extremely privileged to have Dr. G. Gopakumar, an eminent constitutional expert, as a resource person for the day. We are very fortunate that our principal, Dr. Venugopal sir, is always an inspiring figure for all the activities in the college. On behalf of the whole college, I welcome Dr. Venugopal sir to this event. Now, let me introduce Professor Dr. G. Gopakumar, the resource person of the day. He is formerly Vice Chancellor of the Central University of Kerala. Earlier, he was Professor and Head of the Department of Political Science and Dean of Social Sciences in the University of Kerala. He also served as the Director General of the Institute for Parliamentary Affairs, Government of Kerala, and also the Vice Chairman of the Credit and Semester System of the University of Kerala. He has published 12 books and 150 research articles. As a research guide, he successfully guided 28 PhD scholars. His area of interest are comparative politics and international relations. He strengthened election studies or psephological studies in Kerala and was a regular TV commentator on Indian politics and Kerala politics. He received numerous international fellowships, awards, and teaching assignments and worked in USA, Canada, Australia, France, Thailand, etc. It is really an honor to have such a distinguished figure as the guest speaker today. With all respect, on behalf of the entire fraternity of NSS College Pandalam, NAC Civil Services Club and IQAC, I extend a warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
I also welcome all the participants for showing interest in this virtual lecture and also being part of it. Thank you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to meet you all. Unfortunately, we could not meet last time. I'm really sorry for that. Now we are meeting to discuss on democracy and the Indian Constitution. Actually, what we wanted to understand is how India adapted to the Constitution and to the democratic experience. So, the Indian experience in democracy and Constitution constitute the theme of today's discussion. Before I start giving details about the various provisions of the Constitution, I wanted all of you, to familiarize with the two concepts which are very relevant. One is Constitution, the other is constitutionalism. How do we relate Constitution and constitutionalism? Both are actually beyond simple concepts because it has got both theoretical and practical implications. Defining Constitution, one could say that it is a supreme law of the land. Constitution is a living document that binds people, society, state and government. So it's a contract between people, society and government, and the contract is the Constitution. The document is the Constitution. It is a mother of all institutions because everything originated from the Constitution. It has its source and origin from the Constitution. So it is the supreme law of the land. It is a mother of all institutions, a living document that binds people, state, government, and society. Justice V.R. Krishnaiyer long back defined the Constitution as the birth certificate of a nation. So a nation becomes a democracy with a birth certificate, and that is a Constitution according to Justice V.R. Krishnaiyer. I will speak a little more on Constitution before I start discussing on constitutionalism, and then we go for Indian experience. What are the minimum elements of a constitution? what constitutes the minimum elements of a constitution? One second. So what are the minimum elements of a constitution? Usually a constitution will contain minimum 4 aspects. One is preamble, the other is Bill of Rights or fundamental rights, third is division of labor, and the fourth is the provision for amendment of the constitution. The student who gave a brief introduction also mentioned a word on preamble. What is preamble? It is an introduction or a preface to the constitution. It is a curtain raiser. It gives an idea about the constitution in a nutshell. Second is fundamental rights or Bill of Rights. In America, they call it Bill of Rights. And the third is division of powers. Division of powers between legislature, executive, and judiciary. And the fourth category is amendment procedure. The third and fourth are very important because the governmental powers cannot be concentrated into a single institution. So there has to be a legislature whose job is to make laws, executive whose task is to implement the policies and acts passed by the legislature, and judiciary whose task is to interpret the constitution, adjudicate the constitution, and safeguard the constitution. So all the 3 organs, legislature, executive, and judiciary, are important. And the fourth element is what we call amendment procedure. It is very important because if a constitution doesn't have an amendment procedure, the risk is that people may revolt. People may fight against the state. So there has to be, like in a machine, there has to be a shock absorber. Every constitution should have a shock absorber. And that is what is called the amendment procedure. So 4 elements, I repeat: preamble, fundamental rights, division of powers, and amendment procedure. Constitutions are also classified between written and unwritten constitution. You know very well that British constitution is called the unwritten constitution. Most of the constitutions are written in nature. British constitution is called unwritten, which means the conventions, precedents, the values that they have accumulated over centuries constitute the real spirit of the constitution. So without a proper document, the spirit of constitutionalism is very thriving in United Kingdom. So, but most of the countries do have written constitution. Now, I must say that without a constitutionalism, even written constitution cannot be guaranteed. The mere presence of a written constitution doesn't guarantee the success of a constitution. We need constitutionalism. Otherwise, this document becomes a paper without any value. So I'm going to deal with a little more on constitutionalism and constitution. The ideals and philosophy of the state are reflected in the constitution. It is a document for centuries. The constitution did not come out of a sudden development. It is a product of a series of measures which is called the pre-constitutional debate. In India, we have had the Constituent Assembly debates for nearly 3 years. In America, the Federalist Papers, there was a heavy debate in America from 1783 to 1789 for 6 years as to how to structure the Constitution, whether the Constitution should be centralized or decentralized. So this debate is documented in what is called the Federalist Papers. So like our Constituent Assembly debates, there is a Federalist Papers wherein the fearful debate about how to structure the Constitution is embodied, and more particularly how to balance between the federal government at the national level and state government. Because in America, they have committed more for giving powers to the states and local governments and not to the central government. So that is why the Federalist Papers became important. Unlike in India, where the partition between India and Pakistan compelled the makers of the Constitution to think very seriously about providing more powers to the central government. I'll come to that details later, but let me also say in Sri Lanka also there was a heavy debate. The 13th Amendment of the Sri Lankan Constitution provided for devolution of powers to the local government. But as you know very well, for about 25 years there was civil conflict in Sri Lanka from 1983. So it lasted for another 25 years. By 2009 it was almost over. So in the new amendment, the 19th and 20th Amendment gives more powers to the central government in Sri Lanka, mainly because of the civil unrest. In India, the local governments were not originally powerful. There was a reference about local government in the directive principles of state policy. But after the 72nd and 73rd Amendment in the Indian Constitution, we have structured local governments, and now we have got a very powerful local government system. Many of you must have voted for the recent Panchayat elections or municipality elections held a week ago, and you know that democracy deepened with the arrival of local governments. So local governments like state governments and central governments are also constitutionally provided, and that is why they have got so much of values, and they are very much instrumental for the transformation of democracy. Now, let me step into the concept of what is called constitutionalism with more detail. The aim of constitutionalism is to ensure an orderly, liberal, and peaceful change in the society and state. That is a very goal of constitutionalism, to ensure a liberal, peaceful, and orderly change in the society and the state. Constitutionalism advocates for implementing the letter and spirit of the Constitution. So both the letter and spirit of the Constitution are to be implemented, and upholding the spirit of rule of law. That is the very message of constitutionalism. Constitutionalism guarantees not only the powers of legislature, executive, and judiciary, it also ensures a democratic form of government wherein media and civil society are very important. Today, the quality of a democracy is measured in terms of the strength of the media and the powers of the civil society. If the media and civil society are crippled, then it is not a democracy. And therefore, the spirit of constitutionalism is guaranteed not only because of the document called the Constitution, but also because of the preservation and relevance of a strong civil society and the media. Now, understanding the values of democracy is very significant for nurturing and preserving constitutionalism. So, you can achieve constitutionalism by promoting and understanding the values of democracy. So we have to preserve constitutionalism by promoting the values of democracy. And this cannot be achieved easily. We need good education. We need strong political awareness. We need social and economic development. we also require good mobility on the part of the people. So constitutionalism will not survive without good education, strong political awareness, social and economic development, and mobility of the people. You know, when India achieved freedom 72 years ago, 1947, 73 years ago, our literacy was just 17%. Now it is 75+%. So 73 years ago, we are only 17%. So what kind of education was there? What kind of awareness was there? What kind of political knowledge was there? What kind of mobility was there? What kind of socio-economic development was there? In other words, these are very important for constitutionalism, without which constitutionalism will not survive. I am going to identify a few points regarding the threats to constitutionalism. What are the threats to constitutionalism? Number one, socio-economic degradation and deprivation. If a society is not socially and economically developed, and if the people are not empowered, such a society will have very low voltage of constitutionalism. When India demanded for freedom, the then British Prime Minister was very cynical. He said that since India has a feudal and pre-capitalist and patriarchal and tribal order, social order, with so much of social injustice, you will never run with a democracy. You will end up in anarchy. That was the prediction made about India by Winston Churchill. There are many others, including American ambassadors, who were all cynical about India's future. So unless we improve social and economic development and empower the society, constitutionalism will not survive. Second, if there is war, if there is internal conflict, if there is terrorism, and if there is so much of instability and upset of social and political order, then again constitutionalism will not survive. So constitutionalism will not survive with war and terrorism, without peace and stability. So these are very important for the promotion of constitutionalism. Again, if a country is having emergency, then we will suspend our fundamental rights, our freedom of speech and movement, etc. will be prevented or arrested. Some of you may be aware, or you must have read, that in 1975, India suspended democracy by imposing emergency for about 22 months. So we suspended democracy, meaning we suspended fundamental rights. We arrested our freedom and movement. So in an emergency, constitutionalism will not survive. Another threat to constitutionalism is the rise of communalism and casteism. So communalism and casteism are grave threats to constitutionalism. If a country is full of superstitious beliefs, caste hierarchy, traditional values, unscientific values, then again you will not be able to provide a scientific temper, and there won't be any constitutional spirit. So that is another great challenge. So a country having communalism, casteism, superstition, caste and religious hierarchy, they are great threats to constitutionalism. And finally, if there is a lack of vibrant political culture and people are not participating in politics, public participation is weak, then there will be great challenge to democracy and great challenge to constitutionalism. So decline of constitutionalism can lead to anarchy, lawlessness, So under totalitarian systems, under one-party system, etc., you will not have democratic values. Now, I have compared constitution and constitutionalism, the various dimensions of the two concepts, constitution and constitutionalism. Along with that, as I mentioned, it is having both theoretical and practical values. But an introduction to both are important before we start familiarizing with Indian Constitution. Now let me come to the Indian Constitution. As all of us know, we are very, very proud of claiming that we are the largest democracy in the world, with 135 crores of people, or 1,350 million people. Second largest populated country in the world. The biggest populated country for democracy is India. So remember, what a great risk we have taken without education, without literacy. Only 17% were literate in 1947. Of course, the population was very less, but even then 40 crores was a huge number. Now we have 135 crores. So during the last 73 years of independence, 71 years of Indian Constitution, we have moved a lot. You know that the Constitutional Day was called November 26, 1949, the day on which we adopted the Constitution. The Constituent Assembly adopted the Constitution on 26th November. So every year, 26th November, we celebrate it as Constitution Day. 2 months after 26th November 1949, January 26, we became a republic. So we became a republic, which means the Constitution started implemented from 26 January 1950. 2 months prior to that, we approved the Constitution. So we have a large number of people, huge population. We are a parliamentary democracy. We conducted 17 Lok Sabha elections. The last Lok Sabha election was in 2019. Many of you must have voted. We had 325 assembly elections. In Kerala also we had 17 elections so far, starting from 1957. Prior to that, we were Travancore Cochin. So our last assembly election was in 2016. Next year, in April, May, we will have the next assembly election. So in India, we had 17 Lok Sabha elections, 325 assembly elections throughout. We are having 28 states now, 8 union territories, Delhi as national capital territory. We have the longest constitution with 395 articles, the biggest democracy, largest constitution, 395 articles, divided in 22 parts or sections. Besides, we have 12 schedules. So 395 articles in 22 parts and plus 12 schedules. We have amended the Constitution number of times, total 104. So we have amended the Constitution 104 times. We have completed the Constitution through our debates in the Constitution close to 3 years, but not 3 years exactly, 2 years, 11 months, 20 days. That was how we completed. But we were very lucky. Your younger generation can understand that we had great leaders, and therefore we were able to structure a very good constitution with a very good, great, blessed leadership, sound leadership, and their participation was and their contribution in the making of the Constitution was very, very significant. Now, I will identify the basic features of the Constitution, and I will also give the structure of the Constitution, and then I will give a discussion on the Constitution. If you go by the structure of the Constitution, it starts with a preamble. Preamble is very much a part of the Constitution. Preamble is followed by second, we have by section, what is called the part 1, the Union and the States, part 2, citizenship, part 3, fundamental rights, part 4, directive principles of state policy, and then we go for executive, legislature and judiciary, and further details regarding various important institutions like Election Commission of India, Comptroller and Auditor General. All these things are provided. There is also clear provision about states and union territories and classification based upon executive, legislature and judicial. There is also provision for amendment of the Constitution in Part 20, Article 368. And some of the important articles are embedded in the fundamental rights, particularly Article 32 and 226, which provides for judicial review. Right to property, which was a part of fundamental right, was amended and repealed. It was originally provided in 19F and 31 of the fundamental rights of the Constitution. Now it has been shifted to an ordinary article called 300A. So right to property is no more a fundamental right. I will go to those details step by step. I'm going to identify the basic features of the Constitution, but let me recite the preamble briefly. Somebody had also given a brief introduction to the preamble. I will also repeat with a little more detail. So preamble starts by saying, we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to give all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, faith, belief, and worship, equality of status and opportunity, fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual, and unity and integrity of the nation. On this day, 26 November 1949, do we hereby adopt, enact, and give ourselves this Constitution. So I have completed reciting the preamble. It is very, very brief. What is more important is that once you read the preamble, you get an absolute idea of the Constitution. I said it is like a curtain raiser. It's a brief one. It is a key to the Constitution. Some people say preamble is the soul of the Constitution. By looking into the soul of the Constitution, we get a full idea. It says that we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, means absolutely powerful, socialist. Originally, the socialist secular was not there. 42nd Amendment, it was included in the Constitution. Sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. So it is not only a democracy, but also it's a republic. So we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. So it gives a clear message about India and give its citizens very clear 4 things: justice, justice, then justice, that is social, economic, and political. But justice is very important, very original in the constitution. Liberty, equality, and fraternity, those things you must have heard right from the French Revolution literature and history, or in the American Revolution. But this first concept, justice, social, economic, and political, it is very, very natural. I think very original. Ambedkar was instrumental in using this. Justice, social, economic, and political, which means social justice is important, economic justice is important, political justice is important. So that is very original. We have not copied from any constitution. It is originally Ambedkar's idea. The other 3 things: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberty of status and opportunity, and assuring the dignity of the individual. Equality of status and opportunity. So liberty of thought, expression, faith, and belief. The liberty of thought, expression, faith, and belief, equality of status and opportunity, fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual, and unity and integrity of the nation. So it gives very clearly that we are committed to a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. We are committed to assuring social, economic justice and political justice. We are committed to uphold liberty, equality, and fraternity. So it's a clear commitment of a democratic republic with commitment to justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. So if somebody asks you, is there anything original? Because we have compared from many, many constitutions, but you can tell them this particular sentence in the preamble, justice, social, economic, and political, you will not find anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. It is very much original in our constitution. Of course, other things we have borrowed. Ambedkar has admitted that I don't claim any originality in this constitution. We have studied and compared the virtues and vices of many constitutions, and this is a comparative study. This is what Ambedkar had claimed while completing the constitution. Now, let me come to the basic features of the constitution, because by understanding the basic features, you will get an idea about the whole spirit of the constitution. Those who wanted to take down, I can identify those features, and then I will go for detailed discussion. Number 1, supremacy of the constitution with judicial review. That is number 1. I will explain later. I am identifying one by one. I have identified 12 features, so I wanted to identify each one of them. Supremacy of the constitution. 2, democracy, parliamentary democracy. Democracy, semicolon, parliamentary democracy. That is another feature. 3rd, sovereign republic. Sovereign republic. 4th, secularism. 4th, secularism. 5th, federalism. Federalism. 6th, judicial review. Next, separation of powers. Eighth one, adult franchise, free and fair elections. Adult franchise, free and fair election. Not only just adult franchise, free and fair election. 9. Unity and sovereignty of the country. Unity and sovereignty of the country. 10th, individual freedom. Individual freedom. 11th, limited amending powers. Limited amending powers. 12, rule of law. Rule of law. So I'm going to repeat again just for your reference. Supremacy of the constitution. Second, democracy, that is parliamentary democracy. Next, sovereign republic. Next, secularism. Next, federalism. Next, judicial review. Next, separation of powers. Next, adult franchise, free and fair election. Next, unity and sovereignty. Next, individual freedom. Next, limited amending powers. And last one, rule of law. Actually, this is an extended one, but these are all basic features of the Constitution. Originally, the Constitution did not identify the basic features. In a celebrated case, Kesavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, 1972, the Supreme Court came out with a landmark judgment, making it clear that the Parliament can amend any provision of the Constitution. But while doing so, it shall not amend or touch or destroy the basic features of the Constitution. So I have identified the basic features. There is no compromise on these 12 points. Parliament can make any law, but they cannot change these 12 points. That is a message I wanted to say. So these are all very important, but as you know, each of these features are having its own value and spirit. So I will start one by one giving a little explanation. You can later ask questions on these. Supremacy of the Constitution. Number 1, Indian Constitution is supreme. No law in the country is supreme, subject to the Constitution of India. Parliament may be powerful. Parliament can make any law, but they cannot make an unconstitutional law because Constitution is supreme. So all organizations, all institutions in the country, they all originated only because of the Constitution. So Constitution and its supremacy is guaranteed. Whichever party comes to power, they cannot destroy the Constitution. Constitution is all powerful. Number 2, parliamentary democracy. We are a democracy, we are a parliamentary democracy, which means we have elections to make a government, which is called the Council of Ministers, headed by a Prime Minister. So Prime Minister is not directly elected by the people. We do not have an American type of presidential system. We have a parliamentary democracy, which means Parliament elects a Council of Ministers. In other words, the majority party or majority coalition forms the government. And the leader of the majority party or majority coalition elects its Prime Minister. The same rule applicable to states also. Number 3, sovereign republic. India is a sovereign republic. Sovereignty means internally we are supreme, externally we are independent. Externally we are an independent country, internally we are very powerful. India is internally supreme and we are headed by a president. That is why it is called a republic. The president, of course, unlike America, is not directly elected. He is elected by an electoral college. As students of political science, you know, electoral college consists of elected members of the parliament plus state legislatures, lower house of state legislatures. If it is a bicameral one, only the lower house enjoys the powers. So all elected members of the parliament plus elected members of the lower house of the state legislature, that constitute the electoral college, and electoral college elects the president of India. Vice president is also indirectly elected like the president by the elected members of Indian parliament. So vice president is elected by a different electoral college, the president is elected by a different electoral college. Because we have a head of the state, it is called a republic. Of course, our president is not powerful like American president, but our president is not a rubber stamp like the British crown. So he is not a rubber stamp like British crown, but is not a powerful president like American president. He has some discretionary powers, but Prime Minister and Council of Ministers with a parliamentary majority governs the country, which means the Prime Minister recommends the resolution of the cabinet to the President, and President will have to sign that bill. Of course, he can send it back, but if the Parliament again passes it, then the President will have to sign. The President cannot refuse to sign if the Parliament again passes the law. So, President is not absolute and he is not enjoying a veto like American President. But he is not a rubber stamp like British crown. Number 4, secularism. The most contested and controversial concept of India's democracy is secularism. I am sure many will be asking questions on that. But I will be briefly telling you that India is a secular country, which means Indian state has no religion. Indian state has no religion. People can have beliefs, people can worship, people can profess religion, people can become part of religion, even they have the right to propagate religion. If some of you wanted not to have any religion, that also is permitted. But in a historically traditional society like India, more than 99% of India's population are believers and committed to one or other religion. So we were a religious society. We have several religions, but state says state doesn't have a religion. State doesn't have a religion. But state doesn't object people to have faith. You can have a belief. You can have your worship. Nothing objects to that. You can be a non-believer. You can be a believer. But state will have no religion. State will not discriminate you on the basis of a religion. State will not discriminate you on the basis that you are not a member of any religion. State is neutral towards religion. State is absolutely neutral towards religion. As you know very well, Indian society has strong religious overtones. But Indian state has no religion. This is briefly I can say about secularism. But when questions come further, we can discuss further. Because you know, in a traditional society, the values of religion continue to influence politics. I will discuss further later. Next feature is called federalism. Our federalism is one with our constitution has given clear powers to parliament to make laws of what is called the union list. State list is where the state legislatures are empowered to make laws. And there is a concurrent list, there is a third list. Concurrent list. In the concurrent list, either state government or central government can make laws. No problem. But if both of them try to contest, then parliament will decide. Parliament will naturally decide in favor of central government, union government. So that is a difference. So we have three lists: union list, state list, and concurrent list. Union list, absolutely union parliament. All the important things. State list, state legislatures can legislate on those items. Concurrent list, shared between central and state, but if there is a competition, Indian Parliament will decide as who will decide, who will take it up. Either Indian Parliament or Indian central government or state government. Let the Parliament decide. That is all. Actually, Indian federalism is tilted slightly in favor of central government. I had hinted you that during India's independence time, we had a partition between India and Pakistan, and therefore we had a terrible time, and we came to a conclusion that if states are given more powers than the center, there will be very big challenge. So the central government has more powers. Union list 99 items are there. State list has 47 items, concurrent list 66 items. Even there is a provision in the constitution that if parliament wanted to shift an item in the state list to concurrent list, it can do that. They have done that. Best example is our own field, education. Education was part of state list. In 1976, it was shifted to concurrent list. So they can legislate, they can shift. So union government or central government has more powers. But that doesn't mean that we are a completely centralized society. We have three-tier structure: central government or union government, state governments, and finally local governments. Local governments, we have panchayat system, three-tier panchayats, district panchayat, block panchayat, and grama panchayats. Besides, in urban areas, we have municipalities and corporations. In some hilly areas, there are other kinds of organization like hilly council, etc. But anyway, minimum three-tier is guaranteed: gram panchayat, block panchayat, and district panchayat. In urban area, it is either municipality or corporation. I belong to Trivandrum Corporation. I stay where there is a corporation. Kanganassery is an area which is a municipality. Nearby areas, it may be a panchayat. In panchayat, you will have three divisions: gram panchayat, block panchayat, and district panchayat. My idea is to say that there is great potentiality for deepening of democracy, and that deepening of democracy means decentralization will work very effectively. So Indian federalism is improving day by day. We are not going to the centralized path. We are adjusting between central and states. But certain emergencies and conditionalities will make Indian system a little more unitarian in nature. When there is a war, when there is an economic recession, I don't know now whether in future we will include a pandemic also. But if there is a financial emergency also, central government can assume more powers. So federalism is improving. It is not put it in a watertight compartment. So there is both centripetal and centrifugal tendencies. Centripetal means moving towards the center. Centrifugal means moving away from the center. So like the pendulum of a clock, Indian federalism is swinging between centralization and decentralization. Separation of powers, next point. Separation of powers. Our organs of government are three: Parliament, Council of Ministers or Executive, and Supreme Court or Judiciary. At the state level, we have state legislature. State executive is called the Council of Ministers, the Chief Minister. Of course, there is a head of the state called Governor. And definitely, judiciary at the state level is High Court. We have two-tier system. Supreme Court at the national level and High Court at the state level. And below that, there are courts like municipal courts and magistrate courts, district courts. But constitutional powers are given only to Supreme Court and High Courts. So we have a two-tier system. Ultimately, powers are decentralized. It is not concentrated on one level. Neither the Parliament nor the Executive, called Council of Ministers, nor the Judiciary. Powers are decentralized. So that is what we call it, separation of powers. This idea originated from French Revolution, because king controlled every power. Louis XIV, he said, I am the state. So when he said, I am the state, all powers were centralized in the monarch. So French Revolution advocated for separation of powers. That was how lawmaking body is called the Parliament, implementing body called the Executive, and adjudicating body called the Judiciary. The legislature, executive, and judicial. America followed that. In many democracies, separation of powers is followed. We are also following separation of powers. The very message of separation of powers is that powers should not be centralized. We will get more freedom when authority is deconcentrated, when authority is diffused. That's the way. I move to the next point. Free and fair election. Adult franchise with free and fair election. Now, you are all voters. Everybody who completed 18 years of age are voters. I'm sure you have all voted. The forefinger on your left hand shows the voter ID mark. Did you do that? I'm sure many of you have voted. I had voted. I had voted. So that mark is there in my hand. Okay. So that shows free and fair election. Adult franchise means anybody who had completed 18 years of age will have the freedom to go for voting. But free and fair election means what? There should not be any booth capturing. There should not be any proxy voting. Everybody must be given the opportunity to vote. This time it was a difficult choice because with the COVID pandemic, we had to give special time for COVID patients to come between 6 and 7 in the evening. Up to that, others were given voting right. Even those patients who could not vote, they were given special postal votes. It was a very difficult election in Kerala this time. But thank God it was completed successfully. Free and fair election means nobody has taken away your mandate. Your votes are not challenged. You have the freedom to vote. Nobody pressurized you to vote. So free and fair election. Money cannot play a role. Finance and money cannot play a role. Religion and communalism should not play any role. Free and fair election means all these things. It is an important feature of the Constitution. Next point is judicial review. What is judicial review? The power of the judiciary, Supreme Court and High Courts, to adjudicate a law passed by the Parliament or legislature. Adjudicate a law. They can refer, they can verify whether the law passed by the Assembly or Parliament is in accordance with the spirit of the Constitution. If not, the Supreme Court or High Court, they have the power to declare such laws as unconstitutional. That is called judicial review. Doesn't mean that every law passed by the legislature or parliament will go to the court. But suppose you have a problem and you challenge it, parliament will discuss. But parliament approved the law, so take it to the judiciary. And judiciary can go through the spirit of the constitution, document of the constitution. And if they find it is fine, they approve it. If they find that it is in conflict with the spirit of the constitution, letter of the constitution, they will declare it as unconstitutional. That is what is called judicial review. In India, both high courts and the Supreme Court, they have the power to declare unconstitutional laws as null and void. The judicial review is an important feature of the constitution, basic feature. I move on to the next one, unity and sovereignty of the nation. We cannot take anything which destroys the unity and sovereignty of the nation. It is very important. Unity of India is very important. I hope you remember in preamble, I have referred fraternity assuring the unity of the individual and integrity of the nation. So unity and sovereignty of the nation, unity of the individual and unity of the society and the sovereignty of the nation, they constitute the fundamental features of the constitution. So anything that goes against will be declared unconstitutional. Terrorism, for example, those who goes against a state, those who act against disunity of those who goes against the state, those who promote disunity, they will be reprimanded, they will be arrested because they are working against the spirit of the constitution. So unity of the country is extremely important. Next, individual freedom. That's also very important. Your right, my right, whatever provisions in the constitution, you have 6 fundamental rights. Right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, freedom of religion, right to constitutional remedies. So, right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, freedom of religion, right to constitutional remedies, all these 6 fundamental rights are extremely important. You cannot say which one is more important or less. For example, Article 17 in the Constitution has declared all forms of untouchability as unconstitutional. Article 14 in the Constitution has declared right to equality. We are a highly unequal society, even today, but our Constitution guarantees absolutely right to equality. No difference on the basis of religion, caste, region, gender, language, or ethnicity. So nobody can be discriminated. Then right to freedom is very important. You have the freedom to speak, you have the freedom of expression, you have the freedom of association, you have the freedom of travel, you have the freedom to move in any part of the country, you have the freedom to form associations and unions. So fundamental rights are very, very important. Individual freedom, in other words, is so distinct and valuable because if our individual freedom are destroyed, we will not have an atmosphere of breathing democracy. So we breathe democracy through individual freedom. Your freedom to speak, my freedom to speak, of course, there has to be limitation. It doesn't mean that you can do anything. You cannot make unparliamentary speeches. That is not permitted. You are not permitted to use vulgar language. You have to speak in a parliamentary language. So right to freedom, individual freedoms are important. There is a saying in political science that my right to sing my arms, my right to swing my arms, end where the other man's nose begins, which means I have the right to sing my arm, but I have no right to touch the other man's nose. My right to swing my arms ends where my other person is important. So you cannot touch him or you cannot touch his nose. So in other words, right to individual freedom promotes for guarantee of democracy. Now only two more points. Our constitution has guaranteed limited amending powers. Our constitution permits for amendment of the constitution, but doesn't mean that you can throw the baby with the bathwater. You can amend the constitution, but doesn't mean that you can destroy the constitution. We have 3 stages of amendment. There's a very difficult stage, there is a slightly difficult stage, and there is a very simple stage. So some provisions of the constitution can be amended by a very rigid method, which means you need a 2/3 majority of the members sitting and voting in the parliament, which is a majority of the total house in each house, plus ratification by 1/2 of the Indian states. It's a very difficult procedure to get 2/3 majority of the members sitting and voting in the parliament, who constitute a majority of the total number, plus ratification of the same majority from 1/2 of the Indian states. If 28 states are there, 14 states have to agree. A very big challenge. So that's the most difficult method. Slightly difficult means reference to states are not there, but 2/3 majority of the members sitting and voting in the 2 houses of the parliament, which is a majority of the total house of Indian parliament. No ratification of states required. So that is the second part. The third part means very simple, where you can simply amend the constitution by a simple majority in both houses of the parliament. So some provisions can be amended by difficult method, very difficult method. Some provisions can be amended by slightly difficult method. Some provisions can be amended by very simple method. On the whole, I would say amending powers are there, but limited amending powers. We are neither rigid nor flexible. We are partly rigid and partly flexible constitution. I come to my last point, rule of law. Rule of law means you cannot distinguish between a rich person and a poor person. You cannot distinguish between male and female. Everybody is equal before law. If there is any question of law, rule of law will apply, niyama valcha. It will not distinguish between rich and poor. It is applicable to all the people. So I identified 12 points, basic features of the constitution: supremacy of the constitution, parliamentary democracy, sovereign republic, secularism, federalism, separation of powers, adult franchise and free and fair election, judicial review, unity and sovereignty of the nation, individual freedom, limited amending powers, and rule of law. So these are the basic features, and nobody can change these features.